Hello, and welcome to today's lesson from the second paper. We're going to be looking at some sports psychology today. In particular, we are going to be looking at information processing. It will be a fairly short and succinct lesson today, probably running for sort of 30 minutes. So hopefully, if you are here, you'll be able to stay for the entirety. And obviously, you'll learn about information processing, the different components of the information processing model, and the different components of the diagram. And by the end, you should know the difference between long-term memory, short-term memory, how to label it, and how to explain each component. And hopefully, some of us, we should be able to link each stage of this information processing cycle into a sporting scenario. So we've got a couple to sort of run through today, but you'll be able to take that skill away and be able to use that in your exam or in whatever context that you need to be able to explain how we process the information around us to make decisions, to make actions, to be able to be performing successfully. So we're going to get straight to it. And first question, really a bit of a starter, is what's the link? What is the link? We've got these 5 pictures here. What is it that ties them all together? There might be parts of our body, there might be components of the head, shoulders, knees and toes song, but what is that one link or thread that runs through all of them? You should be thinking senses. Okay, we've got these 5 sense organs around our body. We've got our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, and our touch. So our sight, our hearing, our smell, our taste, and then our feeling. Okay, our touch, our tactile sense. And we have these 5 sense organs in order to collect data from around our body. Now, I've put in brackets there that we could also include balance or kinesthesis within the context of sport as another sense organ almost. So another way that we can collect data to inform our brain of what's going on, because that's what these sense organs do. They tell our brain, they tell us what our reality is, where we currently are. So you might be sitting, you might be standing, you might be outside, you might be in a classroom, you might be by yourself, you might be with other people. Every single environment, every single second is different to everything else that's been before. Now there might only be a slight variation in one particular piece of data, but it's still different. So from this second to the next second, something's changed. It could be a bit of air pressure, it could be a bit of temperature, it could be my level of fatigue or my level of balance as I shift from my left foot onto my right foot. My environment has changed, therefore how I choose to respond to that environment also changes. So this process, or a very adept word, this process of taking information in to then make a decision on how we then react is what we call information processing. And there's a simple diagram which you need to know at this level. If you do decide to take PE to the next level, into A level or then beyond, there are more detailed theorists who come up with a variety of different ways to explain in more detail what we're going to be doing today. So in a nutshell, information processing is how we make sense of the world. It's how we build this reality, or the perception of what we think is going on around us. It's quite a weird thing to actually sort of comprehend. Just your whole reality, the way that you see and feel and experience the world is technically just a piece of information that your brain has decided to pick up on most. So for some people who they're more orientated towards colour, they might see the world as a more colourful place to be. Their reality is more colourful than someone who is more orientated towards sounds. Just those 2 different people see the world in a different way based on the information that their brain chooses to prioritise and focus on. If we were to think about, go down the line of almost disability, where we do have We have blind people or visually impaired people. We have a lot of colourblind people. There could be people who are deaf or auditory impaired. These impairments or differences from normal, you could say, that even though they're in the same place, they're in the same world, how they are able to interact with the world is completely different because of how their brain picks up on the signals and information coming into them, and they build this image inside their brain of what's currently going on. So information processing is how we make sense of the world so that we can then make decisions on how to respond to the world. So information, step one, enters us through sense organs. Those 5 things that we just had there: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, touch, and then our balance as well, or our kinesthesis, intrinsic factors, such as your balance. Well, I just said balance. But if you were to close your eyes and gradually lean over, you'd probably be able to gauge if you were tipping or what direction you were facing. So information comes in, we then make decisions based on that information to produce a response. So if, for example, I was to throw a virtual tennis ball through the screen at you, you would see me winding up a throw. You would see a tennis ball come towards you, I should say. And as you see that, you make a decision to either dodge out of the way or to hold up some arms or hands to be able to produce a catch. Information has entered your body, you've made a decision, and you've then put that decision into action. You've produced a response. So, the 3 things that we just said there are those first 3 boxes: yellow, green, a slightly different green, and then the blue box at the end, feedback, which I'll come to in a moment. So we have these 3 terms, and if you do have pen or paper, or you've got the resource sheet from the PE portal, then you need to be writing these down, filling these out. Input, decision making, output. The first 3 components: input, decision making, output. Okay, this is your simple diagram that you will need to be able to label. Input, decision making processes, output. Feedback at the end, that's this data which, as soon as we initiate the response or the output, as soon as that output starts, our environment begins to change. So let's say we go back to that tennis ball example. I throw a virtual tennis ball through the screen at you. As soon as you decide to lift your arms up, the second you move them slightly, your environment's now changed. That tennis ball has moved, virtually, a centimetre or 2 forwards. Your hands have moved a centimetre or 2 forwards. Your output has just changed your whole environment. So now we've got new feedback coming in. We've got new information, new data coming into our body. As soon as you move a little bit, or your eyes, your sight is picking up and working out if you're moving at the right speed. Your intrinsic receptors, your perceptual mechanisms, or your proprioceptors, they're starting to detect a change in your balance, the position of your arms. Have you contracted your biceps enough? Have you contracted your deltoids enough? So as soon as we move, as soon as we initiate this output response, we begin to collect new feedback. And what this feedback can provide us, whether it's positive or negative or irrelevant, it can help improve our decision making when we move forward, when we do this again. But I'll cover that in more detail later on. The first thing I want you to get from this is this diagram. Okay, not the 2 loopy arrows, I've just added those in for description, but these 4 boxes: input, decision making, output, feedback. This is your simple information processing model. Okay, we'll move on. So, input, first stage of this info processing model, diagram, process. Our sense organs are there collecting data from the environment, everything. So right now, it could have been that a bird just flew past the window, which is over there behind the screen. If it did, I probably didn't actually pay much attention to it because I'm focused on computer, I'm focused on the writing, I'm focused on how I'm moving and sounding. But it doesn't mean that bird didn't fly past the window. It still happened. It still caused changes in my, in the light and in my eyes and my retina. That information still entered me. It still came into my body, but I just chose not to pay attention to it. So there's a difference between us acknowledging something happened and being aware of something happening and something not happening at all. Okay, so out of my window, I can see there's a bit of space and there's a building. I can't see what's happening behind that building. Therefore, that information can't, scientifically, let's say, interact with the retina and my eyeballs. It can't react with my eyes. Therefore, it doesn't enter through that sense organ. I haven't got the opportunity to respond to what's going on behind that building. But if it is in our field of interaction, let's say, be it a smell, a taste, a touch, a sound, if it is close enough to go into our body, then it does. But we don't necessarily pay attention to it, and that's what this last point here is about. Our brain keeps relevant information and disregards the rest. It's like a sieve. If you were to scoop up a pile of soil or sand, or I've got some rubble here in this example. If we were to scoop up, I'll just move this out of the way here quickly. If I were to scoop up this whole batch of rubble, the larger stuff would get caught in a sieve, and it's only the finer stuff that gets through into what's called our short-term memory. Our short-term memory. This is the waiting area. It's a box that we can collect information in. And we might only be able to select about 7 things, 7 to 10 items. Imagine if you were going on a weekend away, on a school trip or a bit of a holiday. You've got wardrobes with loads of stuff in, but you can only select one bag full. You can only select 7 to 10 items. Everything else you need to ignore and disregard. It doesn't mean the rest of the clothes don't exist. It just means that you've chosen because you've prioritised certain choices. If you know that you're going to, let's say, somewhere cold, wet, windy, then you're going to make the choices to pull out the clothes that suit that environment. You've got that list of criteria of cold, wet, windy. Okay, what is most important in this wardrobe that is going to match the criteria of cold, wet, windy? Jumper, jacket, scarf, hat. I'm going to ignore everything else. The same goes for our information processing. The sieve can change based on the environmental demands, the criteria for success. And we call this selective attention. So it doesn't mean that data doesn't exist out there. It just means that we haven't paid attention to it. We haven't selected the relevant, it just means we select the relevant information that we do care about based on what we need it for. So if you're playing sport, you don't care about what the people are wearing in the front row of the crowd. What you do care about is the flight of the object or the call from your teammate. Because of the environmental demand, you select, you sieve out the things that you want to pay attention to. That's our input phase. Decision making then. Once we have selected the most appropriate cues, the stimuli, okay, we've got rid of everything else, okay, it's literally gone in one ear, out the other. We take this relevant information and we sort it. We put it into an order. We build this picture. Now, if we were asked to simplify our environment, then these are the 7 to 10 things that we would talk about. So right now, if I were to summarise my environment, I'm standing, there's a camera, there's a bit of light, there's a screen, there's a microphone. I'm not too fussed about the colour of the curtains. I'm not too fussed about what's going on outside. They're still happening, but my current reality, this picture I painted in my mind, is of the things most important right now. Because I've selected those things to pay my attention to. Therefore, I make my decisions on how I react in this environment based on those prioritised pieces of information. So I'm moving in line with the camera. I'm speaking loud enough and directed towards the microphone. In order to do this then, in order to actually go from taking information in and producing an outcome, we have to make a decision, but based on what? Well, it's our past. We ask ourselves the question, that one in the middle section there, have I been here before? Have I experienced a situation or been in a place or a time with these 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pieces of data, pieces of stimuli? Have I been here before? Have I been in this environment? If I have been here before, what did I do last time? What was my previous response to being in this situation? And did it work? Was it a successful response? So I've got a picture here of a library. So whenever I teach information processing and long-term memory, long-term memory is everything that you can remember and then some. Infinite in time, capacity, everything. Okay, whether or not you can actually recall what's happened before, well, that's a case of how often do you go to it, how powerful is the memory. But your long-term memory is where we store all of these different almost stories or situations or scenarios that you found yourself in before. So it's every time you complete one of this information processing loops, something comes in, you make a decision, you react to that environment, and then you get some feedback. That is a story. And every time you complete one of them, you store it inside your long-term memory. So we almost build up this library of memories. This library of been there, done that, how did it go? So every time we're in a new place, we compare where we are to have I been there before. We sift through the thousands and thousands of memories that we have in our long-term memory looking for an answer. Because if we've already got an answer, we've already got a story or a book or a memory of us succeeding in this environment before, we just pull that out and we read it again. We just do it again. We repeat it. Now we might not have, and chances are we don't have, an exact replica of the situation that we're currently in and all of the situations that we've been in before. There could be some slight differences. So in the context of sport, let's say you're trying to score a penalty in football. Now, criteria. Well, the information coming in from your environment is there's a goalkeeper there, there's a goal net, there's a football, you're a certain distance away from the goal. But there's also a difference in weather. The ball's wetter, it's windier, that goalkeeper is a little bit taller, a little bit more agile, he's left-handed, not right-handed. You're feeling a little bit more tired than you were last time. So these slight differences challenge your brain to alter anything that you've previously done, just a little bit, to suit it to where you currently are. And that's this decision-making process. We look at where we are, we use our short-term memory of all of these 7 to 10 pieces of important information. Have I been here before? Have I been with these 7 to 10 pieces of information before? If I have, brilliant, what did I do last time? I'm going to take that story out and I'm going to read it again. I'm going to repeat what I've done before and make any changes that I might need to along the way. But this decision-making process is this comparison between short-term memory and long-term memory. Have I been here before? Have I been successful before? Can I use that previous action in this scenario to be successful again? And you finally arrive at that last point down there. You decide on the best course of action. You make your mind up, you pick an action, you pick a response to the problem that the environment is. It's almost like call and response, question, answer. The environment poses the question, you choose the answer to suit. And that's that difference there between that short term and long term. Short term, everything that's come in through selective attention makes its way into this bucket. We then compare this bucket to all of the ones that have come before. Have I been here before? What did I do last time? And once we've done that, we make our mind up. So, output, third stage. We've made a decision, we know what we want to do, we can see the response happening inside of our brain or almost in our mind's eye. That doesn't mean we've done it yet. So we now need to convert this imagination of ours into a real life response. That's our output. So our brain fires off all of the signals required to the relevant muscles at the relevant timings and magnitudes. And we start to create this movement response with the appropriate coordination, accuracy, speed, strength, power. Think about all of these components of fitness. Our brain needs to manipulate our limbs and muscles to try and produce the action that we've just thought up. The action that we've just thought up in response to the situation that we created from our environment through selective attention. And depending on the skill of the person, depending on our level of training, that can determine how similar our real life response is to the one that we thought of. Now, ideally, we want them to be carbon copies. We want them to be replicas of each other. Because if you could do that, wow, that's just amazing. Because as soon as something happens, if you can think up the perfect response and then go and produce that perfect response, well, that's ideal. That puts you in a position of power and control over your sporting action. Got a picture here of arguably one of the best goals to be scored in definitely more recent years or decades. Bruni's bicycle kick. I think it was a 2-1 win against Man City. Now that, to be able to picture, so that ball came in, for him to be able to picture and to think that his body could actually produce this sort of movement to produce a goal, that alone is a very impressive feat. To actually think that your body could do this. It was a bicycle kick with this cross coming over, he's got up, he's kicked it 5-6 foot in the air over his head and it's gone in. To be able to think up that movement is a challenge in itself. To then be able to produce the actual movement that replicated what he thought of to such a degree of accuracy that it actually worked, that's outstanding. So our output is our brain trying to translate or convert our imagination into real life execution. And it's the quality of our muscles, our components of fitness, our ability to recall all of our positive memories from our long-term memory. It's our ability to do all of that that determines how well our actions match our intentions. If you're going to write down anything, it's probably that. It's our actions matching our intentions. So, an example, you could intend to shoot a free throw in basketball, you could want it to go in, you can see yourself scoring, you've scored it loads of times before, but you shoot and you miss. There must be a reason for that. Because if you can see yourself scoring and you've scored from there before, why didn't you score this time? There must have been some level of variation between what you were thinking of trying to do and then what you actually did. So output didn't match your intention. Which leads us to this last section of info processing, which is our feedback. And like I said before, as soon as we begin a movement. So I gave that example of the tennis ball catch. As soon as we begin that movement, our environment is changing, or it has changed. Therefore, we need to update the information coming back through that loop, coming back round and in through the input. There could be a new sight, sounds, feelings. It could be, let's take a cyclist or a skateboarder, for example. Every single push or every single pedal stroke, every bump in the road, every slight difference in the camber of the road, that's putting the body in a slightly different position, and their balance is being challenged. Their centre of mass is constantly moving and their base of support is constantly moving. So they need ongoing feedback from their receptors in their body, from their proprioceptors, their muscles, telling their brain, am I leaning too far left or right, forwards or backwards? And that can continually come in through the input systems, our sense organs, and it can update our short-term memory. You've probably done it before. If you were sitting on a chair in class and you are leaning back on it, you're not really fussed about your gravity or your centre of mass or your balance or anything, as long as you're balanced, as long as you're still and you're secure. But the second you tip too far back, guarantee you're no longer thinking about what's on the board or what your friends are saying. Your sole thought, the thing that is populating your short-term memory bucket, is your change in balance. In that split second, your whole reality shifts from focusing on the lesson or your friends to suddenly self-preservation. You reach forward, you try and reach the table, and you bring yourself back up. Your whole short-term memory just completely changed in the blink of an eye. That's how quickly feedback can influence this whole model. Something changes, input changes, selective attention reprioritises everything based on what's coming in. Therefore, we make a decision based on what's in that short-term memory there and then. Then we change the output, and then that creates this new feedback loop. The second loop, is there one more? Yeah. The second loop of this feedback, so going back to that first picture, we had that loop coming under, changing the input. We also had that loop going over the top, changing the decision making. And that's where it comes down to this last point here. Either outcome, so be it a positive or a negative output, either will better inform future decisions. Because if we use that library analogy, if that response worked, if that was a correct book, that whole story was a good read, we store it, and that's there waiting for the next time we're in a similar situation. We can pull it out and we can use it again. We've got this reinforced, we've got another tool in our toolkit. It worked, brilliant, I can do that again when I'm there again. If it didn't work, well, that still helps us, because now we know what not to do. We've still got, it's this case of choice. We find ourselves in an environment, short-term memory stimuli. Okay, what will work, what won't work? Well, if something failed, you know that you're not going to try that again. So let's take I'll tell you what, fishing springs to mind. So I remember being down the canal and we're fishing, and I tried to do like an over-the-shoulder cast into the water, and my hook got caught in a tree, and that was it. Day ruined. Probably spent an hour getting it out of the tree, and then putting the rod back together with the new line, the new setup, and it was a bad experience. I was in a situation trying to cast my float and hook into the water, and I chose the response of an over-the-shoulder cast. Negative feedback. It went wrong, I felt bad. Well, that helped me, because next time I went, I was in a situation where there was water and I was trying to cast and there were trees. I went for a flip cast rather than coming over my shoulder. So by failing, that can begin to shape our future behaviours and decisions, because we know what to avoid. So success or failure, that feeds back into our decision making and aids future decisions. Have I been here before? What did I do last time? Did it work? Did it not work? And we can gradually pick and choose between all of those different trials and errors. We can gradually pick and refine the ideal response. So, the importance of each stage. Now that we know what each stage is and how it operates, we now need to know why it's relevant for sport. So, evaluating, what's essential. Well, firstly, in input, we need to have good sense organs, because if information can't make it into our body, then there's no way that we're going to be able to select to attend to it. Then there's no way it's going to make it into our short-term memory. Therefore, it's not going to form part of our decision making. If you were sieving for gold and you had the sieve and you scooped, but you missed the gold, then you're never going to sieve gold out of that batch of ground because you've missed it in the initial scoop. So we need to put ourselves in a situation where we've got healthy sense organs, but also they're trained enough to be able to pick up information. If something never makes it into our body, then we've got no way of using it in our future decisions. So it's so important for performers in sport to put themselves in training scenarios where they are developing their sense organs. Are they in open environments where they're beginning to pick up on visual cues of their opponents, auditory cues from their teammates? Have they learned what to look and listen for? Decision making. Important thing here, or the relevance of decision making in sport is, well, it's this transfer from working out where we are to actually deciding how we're going to respond. And if we're too slow in this, then obviously the sport and the environment and the context is going to go moving on, and we're not going to be able to get involved. So how can we speed that up? Well, we can improve the selective attention. If we can improve the quality of the information that we actually put into our short-term memory, then we're going to be able to have a full picture to compare to our long-term memory. So any decision that we end up reaching, it's going to be more relevant because we've got relevant data in our short-term memory. If that whole process is poor and we haven't selected the right things, then we're going to be basing our decisions on the incorrect stuff. So if in badminton you're watching the person's footwork rather than their wrist action, we're probably going to find it harder to respond to the shot because the wrist is far more telling than their feet. And you've just taken up space in your short-term memory of looking at their feet. So any sort of response that you create is going to be ill-informed. It's not going to be as good as it could be because you didn't have the right things inside your short-term memory to start with. Output. So our eventual output needs to be as close to replicating what we intended. The greater the level of variance, the more likely we will fail. That goes back to that idea of Rooney in the air with that bicycle kick. He had to get so many things right. He had to be able to convert thought into action with impeccable accuracy. If he didn't, it would have gone over to the side, fluffed it, whatever. How do we improve that? Well, that's where training comes in. Repetition of responding to certain environments, putting yourself out there in a range of environments over and over and over again, and gradually build up this arsenal of so many long-term memory solutions that whenever we find ourselves in an environment here and now, we've more likely got a solution for this one. A novice who's taken 10 free throws, or no, not free throws, that's quite closed, go for an open skill. A novice basketball player who's only shot and made 10 3-pointers in open play. Well, they've only got 10 books in their library of success. They've only got 10 answers. So they could be anywhere on the court outside the 3-point line and they go for a shot. Well, they've only got 10 stories to base that answer on. The expert, the one who's played for 10, 15 years of their life, well, they've got thousands and thousands of 10, 15 years of history of success. So whenever they find themselves in any position on that court, they've probably been there or very close to there hundreds of times, and they've been successful. So it's more likely that they're able to pull that memory out and convert it into an accurate action. It's just more likely to happen. And then feedback. What is the importance of feedback? Well, concurrent feedback, the stuff that runs as we're doing it alongside the action, well, that can help us respond to the environment there and then. That idea of that chair as you rock back, that immediate piece of feedback from your internal balance mechanisms. As soon as you feel yourself tilt a little bit too far, you kick in, respond, you try and catch, you throw your centre of mass forward to try and stop yourself from falling back. That's important. Instant response and tweaks. And in terms of improving your future decisions, well, if we neglect feedback, then we don't give ourselves a chance to categorise our efforts as good or bad, success, fail. We miss the chance. We miss the chance to draw on that experience next time if we don't focus on the feedback. If you complete a sporting action, if you complete an output and then never really think about if it worked or not again, well, if it worked, then you're going to forget about it and you're not going to be able to use it again. And if it failed, well, you might fall into the same mistake next time. You might not learn from your mistakes and know what to avoid. So hopefully that sort of paints a picture there of why each stage is important, why we need to give all of them their own level of importance. So last part, we are going to be looking at information processing within sport. And what we've got here is I've circled, I've got lots of emails today, but I've circled the performer with the ball. So it's the player in the white kit, just on the top right corner of the key there. And I've circled this person because they're currently in a situation where they've got decisions to make. So currently, for their input, and remember, input, that's everything. Crowd, lights, sounds, colours, buzzers, cheering, booing, players, positions, feel of the ball, balance, fatigue. List is almost endless. Think about those 5 sense organs and then the 6th one of balance. Anything that is coming into the body makes up part of this input. They now need to select what to pay attention to. And it could be the opponents and teammates. It could be where they are. It could be where the hoop is. It could be where their man-to-man marker is. Their level of fatigue and balance. Or success so far in the game. Now, how many times has this person successfully driven in with a layup? None out of 5. Okay, that's going to form part of his decision making. So he's asking himself, have I been here before? What worked last time? How can I recreate that success? Goes to his long-term memory, picks out the best solution for this current set of stimuli, this current short-term memory environment, and he picks the best one out of a pass, a shot, a dribble or a layup. He makes the decision. He then executes it in his output phase, and does it work or not? If he passed it, did it reach my target? Did he go for a shot? Did it go in? Did he dribble in for a layup? Did he draw the and one foul? Could it have been better? This is now where it gets to this secondary part of feedback, not just success or failure, but how's this going to inform his future decisions? How's it going to help him going forwards? Or if it was successful, okay, that means next time I've got some high pressure on my left-hand shoulder, and let's say you got it wrong, you went for a layup and you got checked out. Okay, next time I've got someone who's taller than me, it looks like, very close to my left-hand shoulder, and I'm not yet in the key, Don't go for a layup. Because it didn't work last time, it might not work again this time. Second example, we have got gymnastics. In particular, the horse, where very complex, very difficult skill to master. In the case of the Olympics or big championships, we've got, again, crowds. We've got pressure, we've got lights, sounds, colours, the grip on the handles, the motion that's going on. His balance is shifting all the time. His centre of mass is changing. His base of support, every time he changes his hand or goes onto a different part of the horse, base of support has changed, therefore his whole dynamic balance is going to be thrown, well, not thrown, but his dynamic balance is changing all the time, it's fluctuating. So what's he going to focus on? What's he going to select to pay attention to? Probably the quality of his grip, because if his grip's good and his arm is locked, he's got a strong base for the rest of his body weight to rotate around. What can he currently see? Because what he can see, that will tell him a lot about where his body is or where he's going next. What speed of rotation has he currently got? What position is his body in? Right here, he's very straight. Maybe a little bit of bend, if I were to be totally critical, a little bit of a bend or sort of lateral flexion at his hips. But very straight. Knees are extended. Feet, plantar flexed. He's looking down to see where his next grip's going to be. His right hand is almost ready for that grip. Has he been here before? He's looking down, he's feeling that body position. He probably has been there thousands and thousands of times even. What did he do last time? Can he recreate it? Can he recreate the same muscle tension, the same amount of coordination, the same speed of rotation, the same shift in balance? Can he produce the same as he has done so many times before when he was successful? Can he improve it? Now that's something which we haven't really spoken about. We've said a lot about repeating what we've done before, but can he improve on it? Is now the time that he completes this with no gap in his ankle? And then the feedback. As he's spinning, has his quality of grip changed? Has his rhythm changed? Has his fluency changed? Does it sound different? Or is it sounding heavier with louder hits as his hand changes positions on the horse? What was his overall score? His result. Was it better? Worse? All of this funnels in for the next time he's there. And he can fuel his decision making based on what he feeds back from this time. So that's it. We are going to summarise it there. So input, decision making, output, feedback. 4 components of labelling an information processing diagram. You need to know those 4 stages. And on top of that, within that decision making zone, a short-term and long-term exchange. Short-term memory is where we select to pay attention, selective attention, to put things into our short-term memory bucket, that's 7 to 10 things. It's that bucket that we then compare to our storage, to our long-term memory. Have I seen and been in this environment before? Yes. What did I do last time? What worked? What didn't work? Can I merge all of that experience and create the perfect output for this scenario? We then produce that output and we gain feedback. Did it work? Did it not work? How can I learn from my mistakes? How can I build on my successes? So that hopefully we can improve our decision making the next time it comes around. So hopefully you now know each stage of the information processing model. You should be able to label that simple diagram, box, 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 short-term, long-term memory. And some of you, hopefully all of you, can now evaluate the importance as well of each stage in, we did basketball and gymnastics, open skill, closed skill. but hopefully you can now sort of take that approach into any sport that you need to be able to evaluate the importance of information processing. Input, decision making, output, feedback. And that's been today's group class on information processing. So I hope you did find that useful. If you want to watch it again, then by all means do. Any sort of activity sheets or the student notes to go along with that, you can find out more information on those over at the website just there, thepetutor.com, where we do all sorts from one-to-one group classes, the PE portal and the resource shop, but there's loads going on there. So yeah, head over to thepetutor.com if you did find this beneficial. If you are on YouTube, then obviously subscribe, like, comment any questions, and me or one of the team can get back to you ASAP. Hope that was good, and I look forward to next time where hopefully you can join us. See you later.